Porsche 91730. In the early 1970s, the Can-Am Championship had one of the loosest rulebooks in motorsport. If your car had 2 seats, 4 wheels, and passed a basic safety check, you were free to build almost anything. Porsche saw an opportunity and teamed up with Penske Racing to build a car that almost didn't seem possible. Under the body sat a twin-turbo flat 12, producing well over 1,100 horsepower in race trim. The whole car weighed only around 800 kilograms. On full boost, it accelerated so violently that drivers said it felt like trying to outrun its own tires. The Porsche didn't just win, it made every other car look like it belonged in a different race. With Mark Donohue behind the wheel, the victories piled up. He won 6 of the 8 Can-Am races in 1973, often finishing so far ahead that the real battle was for second place. McLaren had dominated the championship for years, but now they were chasing a car they simply couldn't catch. Fans could almost predict the winner before the lights even went out. Nobody could build a faster car, so the rulebook became the only thing left to change. In 1974, the officials added strict limits on how much fuel a car could use. The 91730 huge twin-turbo engine was built to burn a lot of fuel at full boost. With the new limit, it had to run with less boost and less power, or it would run out of fuel before the race ended. Almost overnight, the most dominant machine Can-Am had ever seen could no longer compete the way it was designed to. The Porsche 91730 wasn't beaten by another driver. It wasn't beaten by another manufacturer. It was beaten by the rulebook. And when paperwork is the only thing fast enough to stop your race car, you've probably built something extraordinary. Nissan 300ZX. In the early 1990s, American endurance racing belonged to big V8 engines. If you wanted to win Daytona or Sebring, that's what you brought. Built by Clayton Cunningham Racing, the 300ZX looked vaguely like the road car sitting in Nissan dealerships. Underneath, it was a completely different machine. It used a lightweight chromoly tube frame chassis, advanced aerodynamics, and Nissan's twin-turbocharged V6 producing well over 800 horsepower in race trim. It wasn't trying to outmuscle the V8s. It was trying to out-engineer them. Then it started winning. 1994 became one of the greatest seasons any GT car had ever produced. It began at Daytona, where the number 76 Nissan shocked the world by winning the 24-hour race outright. From there, legendary driver Steve Millen took over, conquering the 12 hours of Sebring, before heading to France and winning the GTS class at Le Mans, finishing 5th overall against purpose-built prototypes. By the end of the season, Nissan had claimed both the IMSA GTS Drivers and Manufacturers Championships. A Japanese V6 had just beaten America's biggest V8 teams at their own game. The success didn't go unnoticed. Rival teams argued that Nissan's twin-turbo engine gave it an unfair advantage, and the pressure eventually led IMSA to rewrite the regulations. For 1995, the twin-turbo V6 was no longer eligible for GTS competition. If Nissan wanted to keep racing, they had to replace it with a naturally aspirated 4.5-liter V8. Everything that had made the car special disappeared overnight. The program slowly faded away, and one of the most successful Japanese GT campaigns of the decade quietly came to an end. If you're still watching, you're already too deep into this. You might as well subscribe. Mazda 787B. For decades, the 24 Hours of Le Mans belonged to Europe. Then in 1991, a small Japanese manufacturer arrived with something nobody expected to win. A screaming 4-rotor engine that sounded unlike anything else on the track. This was the Mazda 787B. At the time, Mazda was not considered a giant of endurance racing. But Mazda had something different. They believed their rotary engine could beat the traditional giants. Instead of using a normal piston engine, Mazda continued developing its rotary technology. The car used the R26B 4-rotor engine, a 2.6-liter naturally aspirated masterpiece producing around 700 horsepower and revving close to 9,000 RPM. In endurance racing, where cars must survive 24 hours of punishment, reliability can matter more than having the fastest lap. While other teams pushed huge turbocharged engines, Mazda focused on creating a machine that could keep running when others started falling apart. Then came the biggest test. Mazda entered against some of the strongest names in motorsport. Almost nobody expected the orange and green Mazda to win, but the number 55 Mazda kept going. Driven by Johnny Herbert, Volker Weidler, and Bertrand Gachot, the car survived the night while faster-looking rivals suffered mechanical problems. Hour after hour, the Mazda stayed alive, and after 24 hours, it crossed the finish line first. Mazda became the first Japanese manufacturer to win Le Mans overall. For Mazda, it was the greatest achievement in the company's racing history. But the celebration would not last forever. After 1991, endurance racing regulations changed. The new rules moved toward 3.5-liter naturally aspirated engines. Mazda's unique rotary engine no longer had a place in the top top class. Mazda could have built a completely new car, but creating a new engine and prototype would have required massive investment. Instead, the machine that finally proved Mazda belonged among the legends of Le Mans disappeared after its greatest victory. Today, the Mazda 787B remains one of the most loved race cars ever created. Not because it dominated for years, but because for one unforgettable day in 1991, a small Japanese team with a strange rotary engine defeated the giants of endurance racing. And then the rules changed, making sure the world would never see another car quite like it again. Chaparral 2J. By 1970, Can-Am had become the wildest racing series in the world. While everyone else chased bigger engines and more horsepower, American manufacturer Chaparral Cars had a completely different idea. Instead of making the engine more powerful, they decided to make the car stick to the track. The result was the Chaparral 2J, better known as the sucker car. At the back sat two large fans, driven by a separate 45 horsepower two-cylinder JLO engine. Their only job was to suck air out from underneath the car. Flexible Lexan skirts sealed the gap between the body and the track, creating a vacuum that literally pulled the car onto the asphalt. The result was unlike anything Can-Am had ever seen. Unlike every other race car on the grid, the 2J generated maximum downforce even at low speeds. It could brake later, corner faster, and accelerate sooner because its grip didn't depend on speed. Ironically, the concept itself was completely legal. The rulebook never mentioned fan-generated downforce. The problem was that the car was almost as complicated as it was clever. The fan system suffered constant vibration, mechanical failures were common, and the 2J completed very few races. It started only 4 official Can-Am events, showing incredible pace but rarely reaching the checkered flag. Even so, rival teams had already seen enough. They argued that the spinning fans and sliding skirts acted as movable aerodynamic devices, something officials were already beginning to outlaw after earlier aerodynamic controversies. Before the 1971 season, the regulations were revised, making the 2J's ground effect system illegal. That decision killed the Chaparral 2J. Without the fans, the car lost the very idea it had been built around. Chaparral never developed a replacement, and the 2J quietly disappeared from Can-Am after just 4 races. Ford Sierra RS500 Cosworth. In the late 1980s, touring car racing was one of the biggest battles between car manufacturers. BMW had the E30 M3. Mercedes had the 190e. Ford needed something that could compete with them. The original Sierra Cosworth was already a serious performance car, but Ford quickly realized it needed a more focused machine for Group A racing. That led to the creation of the Sierra RS500 Cosworth, built with Cosworth engineering and finished by Tickford in England. The RS500 was developed around the racing regulations of the time. Group A rules required manufacturers to build road-going versions before they could compete, so Ford produced 500 examples to make its racing upgrades legal. The RS500 received a larger Garrett turbocharger, a bigger intercooler, extra fuel system components, and aerodynamic upgrades designed for competition. It looked like a normal family Ford, but underneath it was built for one purpose: touring car racing. When teams like Eggenberger Motorsport started developing the RS500 for competition, the results were immediate. By 1988, the Sierra was winning races across Europe, Britain, Australia, and other major touring car championships. The car became incredibly difficult to beat. Soon, officials started changing the regulations to reduce its advantage. Turbo restrictions limited engine performance. Additional weight was added. Even after those changes, the car remained competitive. But the RS500 exposed a bigger issue with Group A racing. By the early 1990s, many championships moved away from Group A and introduced new regulations to create closer racing. The Sierra RS500 Cosworth was never officially banned. Instead, its era ended because the rules that created it were replaced. Ford built exactly what the regulations allowed, but the result was a car so successful that racing had to move in a different direction.